Hello, this is David with Everything Economics, and today we're going to talk about one of the key economic indicators which tells us how an economy is doing, and that's going to be the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. So this is a measurement of inflation, and of course you probably hear about the CPI being reported on the news periodically. So we're going to go into a little bit more details. All right, so let's get started. What is the CPI? Well, the CPI measures the average change over time in the prices paid by consumers for goods and services. You will know, of course, over time, goods, and services become a little bit more expensive, and that's usually caused by inflation. And, over a long period of time, say 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you will notice uh, a steady uh, increase in prices. Sometimes it's by a small amount, sometimes in other situations like after the pandemic or during the pandemic, when there were shortages, prices increased dramatically. It is based on a basket of goods that represents typical household purchases. So the Consumer Price Index is focused on consumers, so households specifically, not businesses, not business purchases, but household purchases. So this would be things like food, clothing, fuel, um, and other products that a household would purchase. And it's this CPI is commonly used to track inflation. So we can measure how quickly inflation is going. Is it rising sharply? Is it going down? Is it tapering off? And this helps uh, to it helps the central bank, the Federal Reserve, to decide on interest rates. It also may influence policymakers on whether to cut spending or to enact some legislation which may help lower inflation. How is it calculated? Well, uh, as stated, it's a select representative basket of goods and services that households would purchase. We don't know precisely what goods. I mean, we know generally speaking that they're food and uh, rent and so forth, but we don't know specifically how they figured that out. That's actually done um, through the uh, through the government, and they decide on what goods that the average household uh, would purchase. They assign weights based on importance. So some goods might be weighted heavier, and means that it's more important. Food is probably more important than say leisure activities. Calculate the price changes over time, and the CPI basically equals the cost of a basket in a current year divided by the cost of basket in a base year times 100. So they usually set this out over. They have like a base year, say for example, 2024 is a base year, and then 2025. Well, how much has it increased from 2024? Or let's say the base year is 2020, and they will calculate how it's changed from 2020 to 2025. Why CPI matters? Well, it measures inflation, and it influences interest rates and monetary policy by the Federal Reserve. Um, this usually can adjust wages or pensions and contracts. In other words, if let's say you have a union contract and the cost of living is increasing due to inflation, they may try to negotiate a higher wages. Um, Same with pensions, and even general wages may end up paying more because the cost of living is more expensive. And so, if they want to attract good talent, they're going to have to increase the wages. This also indicates cost of living trends. What is the cost of living? What is becoming far more expensive? Is fuel cost rising dramatically compared to the rest of the economy? If so, why? And what can be done about it? And so it just helps us to address that. Now, where can the data be found? Well, like I said, you could look at any financial website like Wall Street Journal, Yahoo Finance, and you could find the current or the latest CPI information. You could watch the news, and they usually have a report of when the report is issued. If you're looking for a little more in depth and you want to find the data and see the information over a time period, or to get more data on specifically what is increasing in price, then a good source is the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, or nicknamed Fred. And this provides you with the latest CPI. Well, it provides you with the data of CPI as well as GDP and other uh, other statistics or data that can assist you in your research, or just to see for yourself how things have changed over time. So here's an example. This is the CPI, and we've gotten the data from the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland via Fred, and the percent change is at an annual rate. So here we have from 2016 to 2025, the changes in the CPI, the median CPI. And as you can tell, from about 2016 to 2020, the rate seems to be pretty hovering between 2 and 3%, and that's usually what the Federal Reserve tries to keep it at. Um, you may have heard in the news that Jerome Powell wants to try to get inflation down to 2%. 2% tends to be kind of like a key point. Um, and so, as we can tell from 2016 to about 2020, the inflation rate is pretty steady between 2 and 3%. Then, of course, we have the pandemic and the recession in 2020, and the inflation rate falls at first because everybody's staying home, everybody's practicing safe distancing. A lot of businesses have collapsed. Such, for example, the hospitality industry, travel industry, restaurants have all lost money. And then when we start opening up, when we get the vaccines and we start being able to treat or to learn how to prevent this coronavirus, uh, then demand has opened up, and we have a huge jump in inflation because everybody wants to go out again. Everybody wants to go shopping. They want to go eat. They want to go to travel. And so we have this huge inflation, which goes on for a couple of years. And of course, as a result, Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, has to raise interest rates to try to get this inflation back under control. And we have a peak in around 2022, but then it starts to finally fall and get steady down to almost to where we want it to be again. Uh, and now, as has been announced I think this past week, that they're starting to cut interest rates. So hopefully we will get it back to this 2% inflation rate, which is a pretty healthy inflation rate. Okay, and here in this example, we have the CPI by category. This is from August 2025, and this just shows us the 12-month percent change in CPI by category. So, for example, let's see, let me get my pen here. We have all items. So this would be all items that uh, consumers would be purchasing, and the inflation rate is right around looks like almost 2.9% roughly, and that would be from August 2025 last month. And so out of that's the average for all items in a 12-month percent change. Food is a little bit higher. It's a little over 3 point, looks like 3.2. Food at home, which would be this would be specifically like your groceries, uh, which is a little bit at 2.75. Food away would be your restaurants. Restaurants. Um, I don't know if you've noticed, but prices at restaurants tend to be much more expensive now. And then energy costs. Energy costs a little bit much lower. And then we have our core, which is our core inflation, which right now is just over 3%. And core inflation includes food and energy and other items as well. So you can find more information on the website that I showed you, the Federal Reserve website, or you could probably find some more information on some news articles or financial reports on just about any financial website. All right, now limitations of CPI. Well, it doesn't tell us everything. It may not reflect all households equally, so that's something to keep in mind. Substitution bias when consumers changing their buying habits. It doesn't show us that. So, for example, if most consumers are going to, uh, let's say they're buying new cars, well, if inflation is high and getting a car loan is a little bit too much, they might substitute a new car for, say, a used car, or they might instead of buying expensive clothing, I might substitute it for less expensive clothing. So instead of going to Neiman Marcus to buy their clothes, they might start going to Target or Walmart because they're substituting because they don't want to spend as much money because of the increasing prices. It does not account for quality improvements. So if we suddenly have better technology and we're able to produce more goods faster, and it which might change the price, it does not help us, does not account for that. And it also excludes non-consumer items. So we don't include investments or any other type of business type of purchases like raw materials or things like that. Okay, now CPI around the world. For example, United States, we have our Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers, and there's some other variations of the CPI if you want to take a look at the Federal Reserve website. In the Eurozone, they have what they call a harmonized index of consumer prices, which is slightly a little bit different from ours. And then other countries have similar indices adjusted to their economies because in many countries around the world, their economies might be, they might have different goods and services for sale. For example, let's say a country in, I don't know, let's say a country in Africa, Angola, for example, is going to be a much different economy than the United States. And so they have different products that their consumers purchase and different types of foods that their consumers purchase. And so it's going to be slightly different amongst different countries. All right, summary and key takeaways. So the CPI is a key measure of inflation. It's very useful in tracking the inflation and seeing where things are headed. It's important for policy, wages, cost of living adjustments. So, for example, Social Security, they usually change it every couple of years, which is COLA, cost of living adjustment, and so they'll look at inflation. It tracks price changes in a basket of goods and services. So what the average consumer would need, and it has limitations, but it remains widely used globally. So it's not a perfect measure, but it's so far the best measure that we can have at this time. All right, thank you for listening, and stay tuned for future videos.